Welcome to Publishing Power. My name is Joellen, and today we have Kristina Stanley from Fictionary with us. She's also an editor and author, and we are so glad to have you here today. I want to tell you a little bit about Kristina before we start. She's a best-selling author of the Stone Mountain Mystery Series, Look the Other Way, and the Author's Guide to Selling Books in the Non-Bookstore. So this is great for all of our authors out there who are looking for additional sales and revenue there. Her short stories have been published in the Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine and Voices from the Valley anthology. So she's won the Audrey Jessup Capital Crime Writing Award, if I can even say that, which is fantastic. It's great to have all these awards here. And her work was shortlisted for the Crime Writers of Canada, Unhanged Author, and the Crime Writers Association debut dagger, if we can say that one. Congratulations on all of your achievements, and welcome, Kristina.
Thank you. Hi, Joellen. Thanks for having me, and thanks to everyone out there who's watching this. It's very exciting to be here, to this audience in particular, with First Editing and partnering here, because we're kind of kindred spirits, and we're excited about talking with people who are serious about their own stories and really want to provide something special to their reading audience. So my goal for today is that anyone watching this leaves with the first steps in how to perform their own story edit. And I'd like to give you some really practical advice that you can go away and immediately take action on and immediately improve your story. So that's the goal.
Awesome, we got it. We're all ears. So take us on a little trip here and tell us how to do some editing, because additional editing always helps your professional editor. Go right ahead.
Okay. So what I'm going to cover today, first I'm just going to give a quick overview of what story editing is, and how it relates to what Fictionary does versus what First Editing does, and how we're nicely linked together. And I want to talk about why it's important for every author to learn this skill for themselves. And then the depth of this will be spent on giving you 3 different areas to evaluate on your own. And then I want to talk about when is the right time for an author to work with a professional editor and how you can help yourself do that. And then at the end, I'll just talk a little bit about how Fictionary can help you perform a story edit. Okay, so what is a story edit? So it's very similar to a structural or a developmental edit in the sense that it focuses on the big picture elements of your novel. So we're not looking at the words, we're looking at your actual story structure. And the big difference between a structural or a developmental edit is it's an edit that the writer performs themselves. And when they do this, they're going to focus on 3 areas: plot, character, and setting. And it's editing that really is to tell a better story before any other kind of editing. So that's the quick and dirty on story editing.
Being prepared.
Yes. What it is not is copy editing and proofreading. And so I just want to give a little bit of advice on when to do these things in the story writing journey. That I don't believe that a writer should tackle copy editing before they have their story structure straight. It's okay to fix things here and there as you see it, but if you spend too much time copy editing, then you go and back and you do your story edit and you change things structurally and you move stuff around and you write new scenes and you take scenes out. The first copy edit you did is no longer valuable and you have to redo the work. Exactly. So my advice is get the story straight first, then focus on copy editing. And for proofreading, there's really 2 steps for proofreading. And one is what you do as an author yourself before you send your book to beta readers or editors or agents or anybody out there. That's your own level of proofreading. And the second level of proofreading is when you're ready to publish. So there's been a copy edit done and you're about to push the go button. So the proofreading happens at the last stage in your editing journey to make sure all the little mistakes are caught and fixed. At this point, you're not changing story, you're not changing structure, your story is done. It's the final step before the world sees your book.
Exactly. Save your butt time.
That's right. That's it. It's the last chance. So go for it. Okay. obviously, because I'm here and talking about story editing, I believe it's really important for an author to learn how to do this themselves.
Yes.
And there's very little out there in terms of teaching a writer how to evaluate their own story. There's a lot of books on writing and lots of writing courses to get that first draft written, but what do you do after? So I recommend spending the time to learn how to do this. One, because really, you're going to be the person who cares most about your story and want to invest time in it. If your goal is to have others read it, and not everybody's goal is that, and that's okay, but if it is, then you want to tell the best story possible for your readers. They're going to invest a lot of time in sitting down with your book, which is pretty exciting in itself. So you want them to enjoy that experience. The next thing, which I'm going to talk about in a second, is you'll get better value from a professional editor if you've already done a story edit on your own work. And I'm going to talk about that and explain it. And the feedback we're getting from our writers is that second or third, the next novel that you write is easier, because when you've learned all of these things about how to structure a story and your characters and how to make the best use of setting, it's in your brain. And so you know it, and it becomes stuff that you just use naturally when you're writing your next story. And so the next novel won't be as hard as the first novel. And I know this from personal experience.
That's very important. You're getting an education, so it's really good to get everything you can. Keep talking.
Yep.
This is good stuff.
Okay. All right. So here I just want to talk a little bit about how it will help you work with an editor. And this is coming from my personal experience of working with editors in 2 different publishers and my agent's editor. And so I know as I grew as an author, the more knowledgeable I became on story editing, the more knowledgeable my discussions were with the editor. I was able to understand quicker what the editor was trying to tell me. So I wasn't wasting time trying to go and figure out, well, I don't even know what that term means, or I don't understand why they're saying this about my book. And so I felt that the stronger I got at story editing, the more value I actually received from an editor. And I also felt that the editors took me more seriously, because I was so prepared and so ready to go that they were engaged and excited to be working with someone at a higher level than when I first started.
That's very important. I mean, it's you have to have that impression, because it's also about marketing yourself, and do they want to work with you? So it's a lot of different areas there.
Yeah, and also you want the editor, if you like them, you want them to work with you on your next book. So you want them to be excited about working with you, that it's a two-way street. And an editor has to spend an awful lot of time with your book. So you want to make that relationship very strong and a two-way street and open and heartfelt. And, you know, there's so many great editors out there, as you know. and also, you know, just the last little thing is it'll save you a number of editing passes, that if you've done the work that you could do on your own, then the editor can work on the harder issues for you and not the stuff that you could have done and gotten ready for. Let's jump into some details about story editing. So what I want to talk about is 3 key areas. And so it's character, plot, and setting, obviously, by what's here. And I believe that if you as an author just pick these 3 things and work on each of them, either together or one at a time, you will tell a better story. And I'm going to give you 3 ways for each of these areas that you can go away with after this and work on. So let's talk about character first. So the first thing to know is who is in each scene. Now, this may seem like an obvious one, but there's so many things this can do for you. If you go through each scene and list out who is in the scene, you have control over that. And you can look at every character and decide, do all of these characters need to be in my scene? Yes or no? Could I cut one? Could I combine one? You can avoid problems where you're not consistent with characters in a scene. So an example there would be if you had 5 characters in a room and the next scene there's 6, you need to write the person into the room, or the next scene there's 4, you need to write them out of the room. Right. So it doesn't confuse the reader of who's actually in the scene. by listing all the characters in a scene, you can look at your character names together in one space, and you can see things. And this is my favorite example. I read a book, and I love the book, but there were two characters, Molly and Maggie. And Molly was a detective and Maggie was a nurse, and they were in with this patient. And at one point, one of the characters put her hand on the patient's shoulder. And I thought, why would the deputy do that? That's very personal. So I had to go back and read the scene and go, oh, it wasn't. It was the nurse, and that makes sense. But they were both about the same age. They both were career women, and it's Maggie and Molly. And I could not remember who was who. And so if you see it together, you go, a little bit too close there. And the easiest solution is just change the name.
Exactly.
And the last thing I want to say about that is you need to check that your main characters and your protagonist and your antagonist are in the right scene. So if your protagonist is not in your climax scene, that's a problem for the reader, and they're going to feel let down that the whole book led up to something and your key characters weren't in the scene. And you can check things like, did the protagonist and the antagonist make it to the climax scene? You didn't cut them out of the book too early. And so it goes for all your key scenes, like your inciting incident and your plot points. You want control over who's in your novel and when they're there. The next thing is who has the point of view. So point of view is very simple. It's just the perspective the story is being told from. And you can have a whole book told from one point of view. And typically that's done in first person. So I did this, I did that, which is great. Or you can have a book told from multiple points of view, in which case you're switching. So again, as an author, you want to be in control. And to be in control, first, you need to decide who has that point of view, which is sometimes harder than it seems. And then I recommend, if you're a point of view expert, great, do whatever you want. But if you're just starting out and learning how to use point of views to tell your story, I recommend one point of view per scene. And if you change point of view, start a new scene, and it gives the reader a little space to know, okay, we're on to a new character now, and it makes it easier for the reader. And if they don't have to think about whose point of view it is, then they don't get taken out of the story. And then once you get really proficient at using point of view, you can put more in a scene, but I wouldn't do it until you're sure you know what you're doing here. Okay, and then the next thing on characters is character goals. So your protagonist can have a single goal for a book. So in a murder mystery, that would be find the murderer, and the antagonist might be don't get caught. And so that's the overlying goal. And what I'm talking about here is each scene, when you've decided on who your point of view character is for that scene, now go and look at what's their goal in the scene. Because if a character doesn't have a goal, what are they actually doing? And why are we reading about them? So if they're too passive, and again, it's okay to have some passiveness, but if your character has no driving goal in a scene, then as a writer, how do you put something in that is going to be against that goal and stop the character from reaching that goal? And how do you add tension? And so I recommend looking at every scene and deciding what's the main goal. And they can have multiple goals, which is fine, but what's the main goal? And then you can look at, well, now what am I putting in there so they don't get the goal? And sometimes they do, but not all the time. And how is it hurting your character? And it just builds everything around your character and makes them interesting. So that's the 3 places I recommend for character to start. It's by no means the end, but it's a starting place. So now we'll talk about plot. The goal here is to keep this woman who's walking along the beach. You want her to keep reading your book. Don't do anything else but read my book, and that's it. So here we're going to talk a little bit about the flow of your novel. So I'm back to my scene by scene, looking at the purpose of a scene. And what this means really to a writer is, why is the scene in your novel? And the reason this is important after a first draft, and I do this too, you write your first draft and sometimes you get a little carried away and you write these great scenes, but the scene might not have anything to do with your story, but it's a really good scene. So if you can ask yourself, why did I write this scene and what does it have to do with my plot? So what's its purpose in my story? great. If you have an answer, gold star to you, keep it. If you're not sure, then try and up the purpose of the scene and make it really relevant to your plot and keep it. If it has no purpose to your story, you have to cut it, which is really hard. And by cutting it, I mean copy it out and put it somewhere and save it, because you don't know in a sequel you might use that scene or for a different book or something. So don't delete it, but take it out of your story. And to just help you with flow a little bit. So this is, I love this, because this to me, a scene entry hook, is what keeps a reader starting every scene and reading past the first paragraph. So we all know the thing of the first line of your book is the most important, and you got to hook the reader early. But I think you have to hook the reader at every scene. So it's hard work. But if you put an entry hook in, and it could be just starting in media res, so right in the middle of the action, start your scene, or a really good line of dialogue, a secret is revealed, something fantastic about the setting if you're doing a fantasy novel, but something that the reader goes, oh, I have to read this scene, and it leads them into it. And then you can do all the other stuff that the scene needs to do, but to get them past that first little bit. And then going out the other end for each scene, you need an exit hook. And an exit hook can be a cliffhanger. It can be a secret revealed. It can be a plot twist. It can be some kind of tension between the protagonist, the antagonist. But the goal is here that the reader thinks, okay, I finished the scene. Now I want to start the next scene. I'm not satisfied. I have to go find out what's happening next. And then you repeat. In the next scene, you look at the scene entry hook, and then you look at the exit hook. And this will train you on how to flow in and out of scenes, and particularly when you're switching point of view. So the storyline might switch. You can see what you're doing at the beginning, at the end, and does the next scene make sense to come there? And it's really your first look at working at the overall flow of your plot. So that's the 3 on plot. Now we get on to setting, and this is one of my favorite questions. And so for every location that you use, for every scene, you ask yourself, is this the best place for emotional impact? And I started this from personal experience. My first draft, my husband said to me, do you know you start every scene in a doorway? And you think, oh, that's terrible. First of all, that's repetitive. And second of all, that means I'm in a room. That's not good. So I started doing some reading on it, and I read this wonderful book that told me you need to look at the emotional impact of your setting. And it just opened up my imagination and my creativity on, okay, think about this. What emotion do you want the character to feel? And if you know that, you can pick a setting that then does that. And if the character feels something, your reader's probably going to feel something too. And so I'll just give you a little example. Let's say you have an employer who she wants to fire an employee. So do you want that employer to feel strong and powerful and confident? Or do you want her to feel vulnerable and frightened? And so if you want her to feel powerful, put her in her office or put her in a conference room where she's got the big chair and the other person has the little chair, or you give her the PowerPoint. If you want her to feel vulnerable, make the meeting happen at night in a parking lot where it's stormy and the light's broken and nobody can hear her. And then all of a sudden, same scene, same words, but now the reader is set up to go, uh-oh, this is not good, or yay, she's going to do this, depending on what it is that you want to achieve. And then the other thing about setting is there's a lot you can do with setting. So you can use setting to establish mood. For example, a thunderstorm is rolling by. If it's a couple sitting, having a glass of wine on their back porch, it could be a very romantic moment. If it's a couple on a sailboat in the ocean, not so romantic. It's a little bit frightening. So you can accomplish different things. You can also use it to show who is your character. So if a character walks into somebody's home and they start snooping, okay, so that tells you something about the character. If they walk in and completely ignore or frown at the dog or the cat, that tells you something. if they walk in and go immediately and play with the baby or pick up family photos, that tells you something. So without saying my protagonist loves babies, you have your protagonist walk in a room and pick up the baby, and the baby's part of the setting. And then all of a sudden you've shown your reader something about your character just by using the setting to bring it out. So those are my top 3 for settings. So I just want to round that out by saying, if you take these 3 areas, character, plot, and setting, and use the 3 questions and go through, and I know this sounds like hard work, but it's worth it. If you look at every scene in your novel and answer these and then revise accordingly, your story will be stronger and better, and it's totally, totally worth it. And as you work through a few scenes, it becomes easier, and you can look at it quicker, and you can make the changes quicker.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I think that's super sweet and simple, and worth a lot of value. It's a golden nugget to our listeners today. So, but I know you have an easier way of doing this. Tell us more.
Yes. All right. So as we move along, I just wanted to cover this first because, you know, I want to be clear that I'm not saying you don't need an editor. I'm trying to help you get ready for an editor. You want to do what's best for your book. So to get ready and to know you're ready, my advice is to really understand the concept of a story edit and complete one. So do the hard work of doing that. The other thing you can do here is trade services with a friend and do a story edit on someone else's book and let them do yours, because it just shows you a different way of looking at a story. And then if you're thinking about an editor, make sure you do the copy edit first before sending it in. And once you've chosen your editor, know what you want from them. So Joellen can help you with this, that First Editing has the full range of editing services, and they can also help you, based on where you're at as an author, show you what's most useful and how an editor can help you based on what you actually want the editor to do.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then the last thing is be open to feedback. And again, this is something that might sound obvious, but in my experience with working with writers from an editor side, the writers who are most open tell the best stories. And I'm not saying you have to accept everything your editor says. You don't. It's your book. You're the artist. You get to choose what you're doing. But if you're open and think about it, you will find, like Joellen says, some golden nuggets of things that will just transform your story. And it is really hard the first time you get feedback from an editor. It can be a little crushing, but that's their job. And if you need a moment, take a day and just leave it alone and come back and look at it again from the perspective that this person is really trying to help you, that they have a passion for storytelling and they want your story to be great. So, you know, I see the writers who come in from that perspective and they enjoy the process more and they do a little better.
Definitely. You know, it's their baby, and we understand that, and we have to treat your baby well. But at the same point, we're going to make sure that you're going to be proud when you take it into either self-editing or the agent or whichever route you're going. It's always about being presented in the most professional way and feeling confident and knowing that you don't have any worries, that you're at your
Yep. And confidence is a big thing, right? That you're going to put your work out there, and that's hard. It came from your heart and soul. So if you have the confidence, your story is good. It makes that part a little bit easier.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary.
Yep. It is. Okay, so to help you a little bit more, we have a story editing book that we're going to give you for free. You can find it at fictionary.co/firstediting, because we're doing this with First Editing. And it's really the next level from what I've shown you today. So if you want to do a little bit more reading and have a little bit more in-depth view of what story editing is and how you can use it, this is there for you to have access to.
Perfect. That's exciting.
Okay. Yay. So I know, I love this. I wanted to put this out there. I'm so thrilled that J.K. Rowling put this spreadsheet out there to show people that she herself did her own story edit, that she worked hard to get where she is. And this is a picture of her actual spreadsheet in her handwriting. And so, you know, arguably one of the most commercially successful authors today had to do this. So we're in good company having to do a story edit. It doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing, and it doesn't mean it comes easy to other people, because I don't believe it comes easy to anybody.
No.
And I just love this because it's a little example of someone who was very successful and
very much.
Yeah. So that leads me into Fictionary. And as you know, I'm the CEO of Fictionary. Fictionary comes straight from me to you. It's my baby. It's online story editing software, and it's a tool that helps writers do a story edit in an organized fashion, where we provide visuals, we provide learning tips inside. So if you're working on point of view, there's a tip there on what that means and how to use it. We're continually evolving it based on what our writers say. And so really what happens, a writer imports their manuscript, and then the magic happens in Fictionary. And Fictionary will scan the manuscript, and right away it builds the story arc, which is what you see here. And it builds a recommended story arc and a story arc based on the manuscript input. And what this is showing a writer is where the recommended areas are for the key scenes. And I want to stress recommended. Fictionary is not about formula. It's about providing enough information that the writer can make decisions to tell a good story. And so once the story arc is drawn, then Fictionary pulls out all your characters, it links them to scenes, it will tell you how many points of view you have, how many points of view your characters have, the order they appear, how many characters in a scene, how many scenes a character has, word count per scene, and on and on. So it gives you a bunch of visuals that are automated that just let you see your novel in a different way and think about it in a different way. And then it gives you a tool to do a scene-by-scene evaluation based on 38 key story elements, which several we've covered today. And it just gives you a little push to look at each scene. There's a basic mode for when you're just starting, and then there's an advanced mode with the full list of key story elements. And it's just a little toggle that goes from one to the other, and the writer can decide what level of depth they want to do it at. And in the end, when they're done, they export their novel and off they go. And so it's really our goal that a writer can use this tool and turn their first draft into a story readers love.
It's really great. I've been in, I've looked at it, and I was just simply amazed how, I mean, it's amazing what it can do, but it's also amazing that technology is so fast that it can go in and pull this out. I was like, whoa, okay, and it's very clear, and it's visually appealing, so you get it. It's a very good user experience in terms of getting in and moving things around and seeing your, I mean, it was almost instantaneous. The little things that just, skipped out. And of course, as editors, we see that too, but to see it from a writer's perspective, like, oh, I didn't say chapter this time. I just put this here, or I skipped this, and just tiny formatting, tiny tweaks and details, which really made a huge difference. So I'm impressed. I'm very impressed.
Oh, great. Oh, I'm happy to hear that. I'm always a little nervous when other people are looking at it and giving their feedback, but that's because it's the same as a book. You put something out there that you've created and you want people to like it.
Yeah, of course.
So this is our dream. This is Miriam Dimitra, and she used Fictionary on her first draft of her debut novel, and she started with Fictionary last February, and a week or so ago, she hit #1 on steampunk science fiction with her book that was published 2 weeks ago. So we're really thrilled with that and so proud of her. She worked really hard this year, and she used professional services afterwards. She did use an editor and a book cover designer and all those things that are really important. She's now doing her next novel in Fictionary. So we're excited about that too. But really our dream from Fictionary is to help writers do what Miriam just did. And that's really what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, that's great. Fantastic. Congratulations to her and to you.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's so lovely. Yep. Okay, so I'll just round out by saying thank you to you, Joellen, for giving us an opportunity to offer something special to First Editing people.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah, and so what we're offering here is we're going to open up a trial for a month. Our normal trial period is 2 weeks, and we thought because of your type of clientele who is, I would think, pretty serious about their writing, we thought a month would give them a really good length of time to work on their novel and Fictionary and get really familiar with it and decide if it's the tool for them.
Oh, yeah.
And then after that, it's 20% off the next 3 months. So that's a total of 4 months in there for a nice low price.
Yeah.
So it ends up being $16 a month for a monthly subscription.
That's great.
Yeah, and on top of that, once you sign up for the trial, then you start getting the first of a 13-lesson course on story editing, and it's a very in-depth course, and we send a lesson out every 5 days, and we do it this way so that a writer has a chance to kind of process the information and practice a little bit with it, and then go on to the next thing. And it keeps them motivated to try something new and keep working in different ways on their book. And then, of course, as I said, the free story editing book comes with that. All the information you need is on fictionary.co/firstediting. And the coupon code to use to get the discount is, big surprise, First Editing. You can type that in. And if you sign up and forget to type it in, just send me a little message and I'll add it for you afterwards, because that happens sometimes. And then people feel like, oh, I can get my discount. But you can always have it if you just send me a little message and I'll do that for you.
This is super great. Super great. Thank you so much for that. I mean, that's 1 month. Like I said, the technology is fast. So a month is a really good, can dig in. I've been in for a couple weeks now and pretty impressed. And discounts like that, that's awesome. And that story editing book, I don't see what else we could ask for. It's great.
Wonderful. So the last thing I want to say, just a little shout out to First Editing. I've personally used their editing services, and I can tell you, awesome, awesome. So if you're looking for somewhere to go, First Editing is definitely a good place.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. And again, please go in and check out Fictionary. It's a fantastic opportunity, and I appreciate everything you've told us. I mean, right now, these just the little bit that we've had here on looking over those 9 points is a fantastic start for self-editing before you come to us, and lots of value today. So again, thank you for visiting with us. We look forward to working with you again in the future, and we'll get all of this out there. And if anybody has any questions about Fictionary, we'll be glad to help you as much as we can, but of course, contact them directly. And if after you are done using their products, you're ready to edit, we are always here. So thank you for visiting Publishing Power, and this has been great. Thanks, Kristina.
All right, thanks, Joellen.